to the ComedySportz Podcast, starring your host, Christine Rollo Capriolo, and today's special guest, Portland's own special brew, Patrick Electrical Short.
Hey, my ComedySportz Podcast listeners, welcome to today's wonderful episode. Today we have Patrick Short. Welcome, Patrick. Thanks for coming.
It's my pleasure. And that means I'm sincere. If I said it was my greatest pleasure, it would be insincere.
Oh, all right. Now I know one of your tells. Good to know.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, thanks for being here. I've been looking forward to interviewing you. You've got a lot of ComedySportz info to share with us today.
I hope so. I've been listening to the early podcasts in the series, and they are fantastic. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, well, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for saying that. I'm having a blast. I'm hoping our listeners are enjoying it as well.
The ones I know are.
Oh, fabulous. So I want to start with your very beginning, Pat. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Madison, Wisconsin.
Oh.
And it was a legendary birth. I'm the youngest of five.
Okay.
And a thing happened in baseball the night my mother was in labor with me that has never happened before or since. And it involved the Milwaukee Braves. Pittsburgh pitcher named Harvey Hanneken threw a perfect game over 12 innings and then lost in the 13th.
Oh, no.
He's the only person to pitch more than 9 perfect innings in baseball history.
Wow.
And my mother refused to go to the hospital until the game was done.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, she was a fan.
And I was born the next morning. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So Madison, Wisconsin, and then you grew up there?
Yeah, I did. I went to Catholic schools there, Queen of Peace, and then Edgewood High School. And then unlike everybody else in my high school class, I went away to college to Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin. It's a small liberal arts college with a music conservatory and other things. And the music was important to me. I played piano and wrote songs and so it was super important to go there. I actually got a biology degree and did a bunch of other things, college radio, was believe it or not, a fraternity president.
Really?
That was a dark period in my history. Yes.
We won't talk about that.
Oh, maybe. There'll be some lawyers interested in that, I'm pretty sure. It was a great experience. And then late in my time at Lawrence, my senior year, I took a little playwriting seminar with Professor Fred Gaines, and the actor Campbell Scott was in that class. So that's kind of cool.
Okay.
And out of that came an opportunity to do some of the short plays I'd written as an evening of theater. So I was invited to do that, and I put together a group of literally 27 people to do these plays, and I directed one of them. I acted in one of them. I helped with lights. I helped with sound. I put together the soundtrack. I wrote some music. And we put it on, and everybody thought it was the most amazing thing ever. I think if I looked back on it now and went to see it, I would find a lot to criticize. But it was really a fantastic experience. And so I graduated with a degree in biology and honors in theater. And I was headed to law school in environmental law, and I even got in, and I deferred to take some theater classes at the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Really?
And the hook was set. So it's a long, detailed story, but I took a stage management class, and you had to assistant stage manage a production, and I was literally the only one in the class who could stage manage the children's theater production.
Okay.
I show up to rehearsals. They're struggling with music. I tell Professor John Tolch that, hey, I can write music for this. I can improvise music for this. And he said, okay, show me at rehearsal next time. And I show up the next time, and I just played along with what was going on stage, and everybody was delighted with it. And so I was assistant stage manager and on-stage composer for a play called Dandelion, which is a play about evolution for 5-year-olds.
Okay.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
And then it won an American College Theater Festival contest and went to the Kennedy Center the following spring.
Wow.
So for a couple weeks, I'm getting up in a hotel, putting my stuff in my briefcase and walking to work at the Kennedy Center. It's like the second play I've ever been in my life.
That's amazing. So did you get did you get a master's degree at UW-Madison?
Yeah, I got a Master of Fine Arts in Directing because Professor said, well, you're going to graduate school here. And I said, what am I going to study? And he said, we'll figure that out later. But he wanted me to write music for him and do that. So I did that for several years and had a directing advisor as well and got a Master of Fine Arts and met a lot of interesting people, Brian Capel, Patrick Walsh, Jeff Kramer, all sorts of interesting people, which became much more interesting when a guy named Dick Chudnow came to town in 1985 to do some improv workshops.
Okay, so where was that? At UW-Madison in a class?
Yes, we were in summer stock there. I was music directing a play called Diamond Studs, and it's a frat boy Western musical set in a saloon. Ridiculous, but hilarious fun. Okay. And Professor Del Lewis came to a bunch of us and said, hey, this guy from Milwaukee has an improv group and he wants to come and do free workshops and you should do them. Okay. And many of us said, yes, we will do that.
Yes, and good job.
Right. So went to the workshops and I realized a group was being formed and I was about to enter my last year of my MFA program and I had to direct 2 shows and stage manage another one and write a thesis. And intelligent, mature Patrick Short said, I'm too busy to do this. So I didn't.
Oh, boy.
And then I went to the first show in September of 1985 and I went, I have made the worst mistake in my life.
Oh, no.
Because I am not part of this now. And It was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen.
Wow.
Yeah, it was at the Hoffman House in east side of Madison, and Dick has stories about the Hoffman House. But I went to 9 or 10 shows during the year. Whenever I could make it to an open workshop, which they held, I would do it. But it turned out I was too busy. So yeah, there's a legend I was part of the Madison group, but I wasn't. Okay. So,
you never performed with them?
No, I never did. I audience volunteered once.
Oh, good job. What did you play?
5 things.
Oh, wow. With an audience volunteer. Great.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. ComedySportz is great. We used to do 5 things twice in a show.
Yes, I recall.
And once with an audience volunteer.
Wow.
And that was pretty special. So, no, I guessed a few things, right?
Good job.
Yeah, thank you. But a bunch of us were hired by a children's theater company in Sunnyvale, California. There's a long story about how that happened, but Jeff Kramer, a woman named Dawn Rowe, a woman named Jane Lambert, who was a costume designer, and I were hired to join this theater company. We all moved out there in the fall of 1986. And Jeff immediately said, we're going to start ComedySportz here. You need to be part of it. And I was like, well, I'm not missing this opportunity again.
Again, sure. Right?
So it took us a year to find people because we were busy trying to find actors to do this.
Right. Okay.
And when we gave up on that and posted some things at Santa Clara University and San Jose State University, we found people. I remember a legendary workshop in the living room of our condo, tiny condo, with Tom Goff and Jeff Ringgold were the only 2 attendees other than Jeff and me. Mm-hmm. And we looked at each other after those 2 guys left and went, we could build a group around them.
Really?
So, yeah, that was super fun. And then we opened in the fall of 1987, and I reffed the first 52 shows.
The first 52, to be exact.
Oh, we counted. And eventually Jeff made me take a weekend off because we got to develop some other refs.
Yeah, right. So. We need more.
So, and then the other thing is that I didn't ever think I was going to be a player.
Really? You thought you were just going to stay reffing?
Yeah, I modeled myself on Jennifer Rupp.
Okay.
Because that's who I'd seen as my first ref. Whenever you go to ComedySportz, the first ref you see will be your favorite. That's my theory.
Sure, that's a good theory.
Yeah. And Jennifer Rupp, Dick's wife, is and was the model. And she was great. I think she was scared to death. And what she did was she kind of was a mean ref to cover how scared she was. She was really good.
She was a mean ref?
Yeah, but she was mean. And so I modeled myself on that for many years. It was excellent.
Well, that's good. So you and Jeff Kramer started San Jose, and you were there about 5 years?
Yeah, he was the boss, and I was the guy with the figuring out how the checkbook worked.
Oh, good. Okay.
And developing the systems. It's like, oh, we have players. We should pay them. How are we going to do this? I was at the time, and this is an important detail, the theater company fired me after a year.
What'd you do?
Nothing. I just, not nothing.
Not nothing.
But let's put it this way. I suggested a lot of innovations.
Okay.
To the general director, who was not a person who innovated.
Oh, all right.
Or liked hearing suggestions.
Okay, so he was done with you.
Yeah, and he got a grant, brought in a new managing director, and the first thing he told her to do was fire me.
Oh, no. He wouldn't even do it himself.
She took me to lunch and fired me.
Aww.
And then I will say that a year later, she called me and said, I'd like to take you to lunch again. And I said, why? And she said, I want to apologize to you.
Oh, no.
And she did.
And she did?
Yeah, it was great. So, but this is how life works. I had to get a job. So I went to temp agencies, and it's San Jose. So I ended up in a computer company.
Okay.
And I was doing customer service at a company called Altos Computer Systems. And what I discovered in California, aside from engineering where you have to know something, if you show up to work and halfway care about what's going on, you're going to rocket up the ladder.
Okay.
I was in inside sales within a year.
Really?
And I was the manager of a marketing department in 2 years.
Wow.
Yep. And so it turns out I'm a salesman. Who knew?
Who knew?
I didn't know that. Yeah. So I did that for all those 5 years. And then I went to work in Beaverton, Oregon for one of my clients.
Okay.
I wanted to move to Portland, and telling Jeff that was a very hard thing to do. But
because you guys were together
you were supportive
together.
And while in San Jose, I met Ruth Jenkins. She was an audience volunteer at our very first show.
Okay.
And now we've been married for 30 years.
Oh, I love that. She was an audience volunteer?
Yes, at our very first show. She also worked for that theater company, so we knew her because we knew everybody in that audience.
Okay.
That's how ComedySportz always starts.
Oh, sure,
friends and family.
Sure.
But she volunteered. She got all 5 things.
Nice
That's
job,
an audience
Ruth.
volunteer. Yeah, they were simpler in those days, but if you think that through, that is still a remarkable achievement.
That is. That's incredible.
Right? Somebody who's not trained gets those 5 things. So I knew I had to marry her, and there you go.
And you did. Does she perform now?
She does. Yeah, we're co-owners of CSz Portland, and she played in our ComedySportz match last night.
Oh, that's great.
So yes, she still plays and teaches, and she's also a speech language pathologist and uses improv to teach her elder and senior patients.
Oh, fantastic.
And it's really fantastic.
Yeah.
And she's actually done presentations at some conferences about that work.
Okay. So now you went from San Jose, you said, then you wanted to move to Portland just for the purpose of opening a ComedySportz?
That sounds good.
Okay. Sure. Portland needed some funny.
Yeah, it did. It was completely open. Actually, it wasn't completely open, as we discovered. But one of my sisters, Ann Berblinger, lived here. And when we visited, we just loved Portland. It's an amazing place. And on one visit, my sister took Ruth around to, quote, look at houses, unquote.
Oh, no.
And it was finished at that point because we were starting to look to buy a house in San Jose. And at the time, $250,000 bought you a hole in the ground.
Right.
Now that would take $1 million.
Yeah.
And in Portland, there were a lot of like 1920s craftsmen and bungalows that were, some not even six figures. So, and this is 1992. So, yeah, we thought we could have a life here. And so we did. We moved. I got a job at a great company selling manufacturing and distribution systems. Ruth went to Portland State University for speech language pathology to get her master's. And we were off and running.
And then you opened ComedySportz, about a year after you got there?
Oh, not even. We arrived in October. We moved into our house on right before Christmas. Mm-hmm. And Martin Luther King Day, we had our organizational meeting where we had posted a call thing in the paper.
Oh, wow. So you already had people interested in performing?
Yeah, we put a call board thing up. 45 people answered the call and 27 showed up to that meeting.
Wow.
And yeah, there was some interest. And by the time we opened in April, we had 12 people. You know how it works.
Yeah, I know.
When it turns out that you actually have to do something,
right,
and show up once in a while, people fall away very quickly.
Now, so you had 12 people at the start. Is that including you and Ruth?
Yes.
And how many of those 12 people, other than you two, still perform?
3 of the others. So 5 of our 12 founders from 1993 are still with us 27 years in.
That's awesome.
And the other 3 get a shout out. So it's Amy Gray, Kent McCarty, and Angela Michtam, because they are survivors.
Yeah. Okay.
It's awesome.
So now when you opened Portland, how do you think that was different than your San Jose experience as far as the shows and performing?
Well, the first thing we found was that the mean ref did not work in Portland.
Portland doesn't like meanies, huh?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, there were frowns.
What did they prefer?
It just didn't work. And when I took my foot off the jerk pedal as a ref, I discovered that everything worked better.
Okay.
It was a fairly quick discovery.
Okay.
Again, less than a few months. Yeah. The other thing that happened, I'd already participated in the opening and development of a group and played there for 5 years.
Right.
And there were things that would happen in Portland during matches. And afterwards in notes, I'd be, how do you not know this? And they would look at me and go, you never told us that. Seriously, there were a lot of things where it'd be like, well, we've done this. Well, no, we hadn't. I had to do it again.
Yeah.
And our first match was at this really sleazy restaurant called the Refectory.
Okay.
And we drew 85 people or so. That was a good start. And but I reffed it, and I had an out-of-body experience during the match.
What happened?
I watched myself ref the show from the back of the room.
Yeah.
I've never had anything like it before or since.
Okay.
It was, and part of it, I think, was related to this is really hard work. Why are you doing this again? Kind of feeling. And the answer to that is because I knew it would be worth it.
Yeah.
It was very hard, but I knew it would be worth it.
Sure.
So.
And you've been in Portland ever since?
Yes, absolutely.
And do you guys have your own theater space?
We do. About 2 or 3 weeks after we opened at the Refectory, I sold a computer system to a theater chain, a local theater chain called Moyer Theaters. Uh-huh. And the president it was a family business. The president was Christine Moyer. It had complicated payroll stuff, which is my company was able to handle that through customization. That was what we were good at. And Christine and I connected very well during the sales process. It was really good and smooth. And it was a big deal because it was the first system I sold for my new company. And I was in a follow-up call, and that's when I mentioned to people that I was involved with in the computer industry. After they bought from me, I'd say, hey, I do this improv comedy show. You should come and see it.
Yeah.
And she looked at me and said, well, where do you do it? And I explained that it was at this restaurant, but we were going to move on because the restaurant was really good. It wasn't very good. And she said, come and look at my theater. And I was like, your movie theaters? What are you talking about? They had a 40-seat screening room in the back of their offices.
Okay.
That was built in the 1930s.
Wow.
And I walked into that and I said, I would like to do shows here. And she said, make me an offer.
Oh, wow.
We don't use it. So I put together a one sheet proposing that they would take 20% of our gross that we earned on their property.
Right.
And we would do shows Fridays and Saturdays. And it very clearly didn't involve anything we earned elsewhere.
Yeah. And
she signed it.
And have you been there ever since?
They've been our landlords ever since.
Oh, wow.
It's a 40-seat screening room. The third year we averaged 48 people a match. Okay. So you can imagine. The record, apparently, I was not there. Some of my players smashed over 80 people into the room.
Oh, nice.
I don't know how they did it.
People in laughs.
There were people in laughs, the entire aisle. We didn't have benches. It was the stage was 5.5 feet deep.
Okay.
So if you crossed, you had to say excuse me to everybody else on the field. It was really tight, but it was a really great place to start because 20 people would make that room feel full.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And
it was a great place to develop. And the other hilarious thing, I'm going to credit Jeff Kramer because he came up for a weekend and he was in the back of the room during a game for some reason. And he noticed that the seats were these big, wide, cushioned seats that would rock back. Okay. And they're super comfortable. We still miss them. And he noticed that when something funny would happen, how people kind of lurch forward in their seat. Well, here they would all rock back and forth, but at different times. And the problem is that once he pointed that out, and I pointed it out to other people, we couldn't take our eyes off it.
Right.
It was mesmerizing. You'd get a big laugh, and the room would be like, in all these different configurations.
Everybody's rocking.
Yep.
So you're in the same theater still to this day?
Oh, well, we're next door.
You're next door, so you have a bigger theater.
We needed a bigger space, and once again, Chris Moyer's like, well, we haven't leased the building next door for 3 years, so why don't you have a look at it? And at that point, I had turned over to her elderly dad, who, he'd been a boxer in college. This is a tough dude, Larry Moyer. And it was an office building that was built in 1940 by the film studio Lowe's and was later offices for MGM. It turns out the entire block that we're on was built by film studios. Oh, wow. So Paramount was down at the corner. Moyer Theater's headquarters was Universal. Building we got into was Lowe's. Fox was around the corner. And they were distribution centers in the Pacific Northwest for their movies. Okay. So we went and looked next door, and there were a bunch of offices in the front and then a little manufacturing space in the middle. And I mean little. And then a garage in the back. And the garage had these vaults in it. And it was because movies used to be explosive. Okay. The film stock was explosive. So when you had to be stored in these vaults to be safe. Okay. Or else, you would blow up Portland.
Well, that would be no good. So that's where you go when you leave the room, you have to put people in the vault?
Well, I'm a little bit claustrophobic, so no. I don't spend much time in the vaults myself. Okay. But because I can imagine the door being closed. Right. But, so we had this opportunity in 1996 to go in and knock down all the walls in the front and create a space. Okay. And we did it. And we had to change it from B occupancy to A occupancy. And we did it without a general contractor.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I was the general contractor.
Okay. Add that to your resume.
That's hilarious that I'm the general contractor.
Right.
I mean, you don't even want a hammer in my hand.
Okay.
But we knocked down all the walls. We built an ADA restroom. We had a plumber to do the crucial stuff.
Sure.
But hey, improv people can knock down walls.
Sure.
And we even built a couple walls.
Okay.
And we had to do seismic retrofitting.
Oh,
So we hired a guy to do that, which was strapping the roof joists to the side walls. And so he was up above the ceiling for 2 months wearing a hazmat outfit. And we paid him a lot of money, but we didn't see much of Carl.
Carl.
And then when we had to cut holes in the ceiling and feral cats fell out. Well, kittens.
What?
Yeah, there was a feral cat mom had a litter up there, and we caught 2 of them.
Oh, my God.
In fact, my sister had Gabriel for 15, 18 years, I think. So, yeah, he was awesome. And then we held up this tiny kitten at the halftime of a match over in the other theater and said, hey, we found this kitten. Anybody want it? And this woman's like, mine.
Oh, really?
And I kept seeing her at trade shows, at business trade shows, and she kept giving me reports on the cat, who apparently grew to be 25 pounds and bullied all the other cats in her household.
Oh, my.
Yeah, it was awesome.
So I want to hear about ComedySportz Worldwide in 2002. Tell me about the inception of this.
Well, it was a dark time, Christine.
Okay.
It was a very dark time.
Okay.
So the short-term story is that in 1999, Dick was approached by a woman named Pat Esgate and a guy named Jay Goldman. Jay had family money from Ralph Lauren factories that they'd run and then sold. And he wanted to get into entertainment, and Pat Esgate was his consultant. She knew about ComedySportz, took him to a show, and of course, what happens? He falls in love with it.
Right.
And they approached Dick with an offer, and he accepted. Dick yes-ands everything. And
Sure.
they went to develop ComedySportz North America. Well, we had meetings with him, and we were cautiously optimistic, many of us. And then the new franchise agreements landed in our offices through FedEx, and we all went, hell no.
Okay.
I mean, literally, when I read it, it was like, why don't I just give you the PIN number to my bank account?
Oh, boy.
Seriously, it was like we weren't going to make any money.
Yeah.
And so we had a meeting among the licensees, and some of us lawyered up, and it was not a pleasant time. And I love Dick Judd now. I owe him with my life, and I have the memory of a couple of phone calls of us yelling at each other.
Oh, no.
And I would take that back if I could in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
But it was a bad time.
Yeah.
And then finally, my lawyer here in Portland, Stuart Cohen, poked a hole in it because he found a way that they could not invalidate the prior agreements.
Okay.
And he would have sued and won, and they looked at it and they realized he would have won.
Okay.
So we went back to the prior agreements, and there was some consternation among the licensees about that. As I went first, I signed, I was like, I'm going back to this first. And then Jeff announced the second. And some of the cities that had gone away never came back, but others were angry at us for a while.
Okay.
But then they realized, okay, we'll do it. And then this was right before the championship in Chicago in 2001.
Okay.
So we get to championship, and we're having a manager's day, and we're sitting at the table, and Dick's like, well, we can get back to business and everything's cool. And everything was not cool.
Yeah.
And that was on a Monday. And that Monday night, Jeff and I stayed up in the lobby of his hotel until 4 a.m. talking about what are we going to do?
Right.
We got to save this.
Yeah.
And we thought we're going to approach Dick and ask him to share the power with us.
Okay.
And so we decided to just send Jeff to not outnumber Dick. So it was a one-on-one lunch. And Dick, of course, he's Dick. He said yes.
Sure.
Let's do this.
Of course.
We've got to save this.
Yeah.
Let's do this. He's one of the most amazing, generous-hearted people I've ever met in my life.
Absolutely.
And he just said yes. And so we had another meeting, and I was empowered to go form an entity that would license the rights and trademarks to Comedy Sports from Comprov, which is Dick and Jen's company.
Right.
And that we would control the licensing at that point. So I huddled with lawyer friends, Casey Christie, who is back in the ownership group in CSz Austin right now, and Ed Ferrero, who is a founding member here in CSz Portland. And we wrote articles of a C corporation.
Okay.
To do this. And then the managers met in April of 2002 at Beverly Hills, and we went over this line by line and voted on hundreds of items in the thing, and then came up with, this is how we're going to do it. And then we had to name it, and we had we put names up on a whiteboard, and World Comedy League won, which is fortunate because G Ha 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 was number 2.
I'm glad you went with number 1.
Yeah, I was worried about G Ha 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 myself. So then I went back to get all the paperwork done. People bought stock and joined. There were 18 shareholders, I think, if I remember. And everybody had signed by July. And that empowered me to be an executive director. I was part of the deal. I was going to do that for 2 years. Okay. And then I negotiated with Dick and his lawyer for the rights. And we came to a really pretty quick, pretty clean agreement on how things were going to work. And World Comedy League took off. Now, we rebranded it as CSz Worldwide in 2014. Okay. Yeah. So we want to call it CSz Worldwide now. But if you talk about it in 2002, it was World Comedy League. Okay. So
when a city wanted to start up, then they came to you?
Yes, they came to. They would come to me as executive director, and then we had an executive council. The C Corp was governed by an elected group among the shareholders. So we would have 5 seats on that council plus the executive director. The executive director is ex officio, meaning they don't vote. But we had 3 regions, West, Central, and East, and we had an at-large seat that all the shareholders would vote for. And then Comprov had a seat permanently on the council as part of the agreement. Okay. So Dick served in that seat on the council for many, many, many years, and now Mary Baird from Milwaukee is on that seat and doing a fantastic job, I might add.
Yes, she is. Yes, she is.
So she's fantastic. And so my 2 years as executive director lasted through 2014. So that was 12 years.
A little longer than 2.
Oops. We did a lot of things, but my way of managing things is that done is better than perfect. Okay. So I would just do stuff, and then if it needed to be fixed later, we would fix it. Okay. And that's how we kind of did everything. And in the rebranding in 2014, one of the realizations I had is that's not going to cut it for the next few years. Okay. So I resigned, which totally shocked a bunch of people, but it really was the best thing. And Matt Elwell from Chicago became executive director, and that was a really great move because he's way more, and he would agree with this, he's way more detail oriented than I am.
Okay. So all along doing that, you were still performing in Portland.
Yes. Yep.
What cities do you remember coming in during your time as executive director?
Well, New York came back for like their 3rd round. Okay. There had been a Mike Rock run New York group in the 90s. Uh-huh. And then during CSz North America, another group was performing briefly in New York. Okay. And then Jill Sheely, who was one of the owners of Chicago, moved to New York. And like you do, you move to a new city, you have to have a ComedySportz to play in. Sure. So she formed it with Lynn Marie Cohen. And I think they may still be the owners today. I'm pretty sure. Okay. So they came in. The very ill-fated New Orleans club came in. Yvonne Landry is a woman of boundless energy.
Yeah.
And doing great things in the comedy scene in New Orleans. And they opened about a month before Hurricane Katrina.
Oh, no.
So I'm telling you, that thing she struggled on for years doing it. But, like 2/3 of her crew that she opened with moved away from New Orleans and never moved back.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, it was an immensely difficult situation.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So Sacramento came in. Richmond came back. Richmond had folded.
Okay.
And we got Richmond back during that time. We brought in a Boise group. They folded for financial reasons, and then got restarted under Randy Reese a few years later. Seattle came in.
Right.
There are others. You're expecting me to have a memory, and I don't.
No, that's okay. That's all right.
So if I didn't mention your city and you're listening to this, please forgive me.
Right. I really want to hear about your teaching to corporations and schools and churches and nonprofits in applied improv. I mean, you have an extensive list posted. Just to name a few, you've worked with Columbia Sportswear, with Google, with Hewlett-Packard, with IBM, with Nike, numerous schools, churches, nonprofits. Tell me about applied improv.
Well, it started in San Jose. It's a tremendous origin story for us, because I'm sure other groups were asked to do workshops from time to time.
Sure.
But how ours was asked, we were doing a match at Squeezer's Burger Factory, which was an amazing place. Squeezer's Burger Factory. We were there for about a year.
Okay.
In their back room. It was a place of tremendous difficulty and tremendous opportunity. But after a match, I was standing in the hallway talking to people right outside.
Sure.
We were doing our high five line.
Yeah.
And these guys came up and they looked at me and pointed at me and said, "We want to think like you."
Okay.
And I was like, "What?
What does that mean?"
As I looked over my shoulder, but there was just a brick wall behind me. It had to be me, and that they were talking to. And they were from Apple, and they were working on printer drivers. They were a group working on exciting printer drivers. Mm-hmm. But it's exciting if your printer doesn't work, so it's important work.
Yeah.
And they weren't even agreeing on what the problems were, much less what the solutions would be. And they said, "We saw your team up there seamlessly working together."
Right.
And I said, "Oh, sure, yes, of course. That's what we do."
That's what we do.
every night is completely seamless.
Absolutely.
And so we didn't know what to do, but we did have a syllabus for teaching 101.
Okay.
Which most improv groups didn't have. We had a syllabus.
Yeah.
So we came to an agreement that we would send a group to Cupertino every Monday afternoon for 6 weeks for 2 hours. And we did that. I sold it and structured it. I didn't teach it. I didn't go. I had a job. We sent the folks who were younger and scrappy. And
scrappy.
And at the end, they came back and client phoned me and said, "Your people were amazing. This was brilliant. We're telling everybody."
Oh, that's great.
And there was a check.
Yeah.
And we just stared at the check for a while and thought, this is a good thing.
Yes, it is, sir.
And there was no internet. So all we did was we put it in our newsletter that we would send once a month.
Okay.
And, like a paper newsletter that got mailed. There's a thing called U.S. Mail.
There is.
And,
it still exists.
It's weird.
It is weird.
And we would just announce it from the stage in Silicon Valley. So people were like, "Oh, let's throw some money at that." So pretty soon we're doing this for a pretty wide variety of companies, and we had no clue what we were doing. But people seemed delighted with the results.
Yeah.
And so it started, kind of developing it as something different from how we would train performance improvisers.
Okay.
And I didn't have the name of applied improv until this century.
Okay.
Do I sound old when I say that?
Yeah, a little bit.
And yeah, I do. I am. When there was a group that started meeting called the Applied Improvisation Network. Uh-huh. And I kept looking at their conferences thinking, this is what I do. I should go to this. And I went to it when it was in Portland in 2009. And immediately came out of it going, I don't want to call this team building anymore. Okay. Because it's way more than that. And I knew it was way more than that. I'd already been asked to do way more than that over the years.
Yeah.
Customer service training and sales training and leadership training and communication skills. But now I had an umbrella that wasn't team building. Team building weaves its way through everything in this work. Mm-hmm. But and a lot of people, I mean, up until about 2012 or 2013, almost everybody who called me was saying they wanted team building.
Interesting.
The beautiful thing now is that people will call you and say, I want business improv training.
Okay.
And some still want team building.
Yeah.
That's fine. But when I talk to them, they need more and they want more than that.
Yeah.
So I started going to these Applied Improv Network conferences, and I've been to 10 of them, I think, 10 or 11. And in some cool places like Amsterdam and Berlin and Austin,
wow.
San Francisco. Yeah. Sexy. It is.
That's awesome.
And the one in Amsterdam in 2010 blew my mind, partly because I was jet lagged, but
sure.
There was getting to the European cohort of people just approach things differently. And there was so much to learn from them, so much.
Yeah.
And I got rather deeply into that. And so I came back and started at managers meetings. I'd start showing people what I'd learned. And people were like, wait, this is different. This is beyond what we've been doing. You know, we show up and play past the clap. There's more stuff.
Yeah. And
so I've sought to, over the years, very, very gently to professionalize it within CSz. I do a train the trainer thing at every world championship and like 4 or 6 hour class, as much time as I can get. Yeah. And we learn things together, and it's awesome. And a whole bunch of, and we've done a certification program, and a whole bunch of people have gotten certified. We have a certification in applied improv, a CAI. You can get CAI provider or senior provider or executive provider.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because people are like, how can we do our own certification?
Yeah.
Well, who knows this better than us?
Right. Absolutely.
Right? Let's put a stake in the ground and say we're professionals.
Right.
So we did.
So when a company comes to you, what do you tell them they'll get out of it?
That's a really great question. And as a salesperson, the answer is whatever they want to get out of it is what I will play back to them. Because unless it's something impossible or illegal or immoral. And I don't know that I've had any of that work.
We don't talk about that.
So, we'll need to branch out. But people will come to us and say, look, I have this team. It's newly formed. We've been given a mission within the company to yada, yada, yada. And then my job is to help literally make them a team and give them improv tools that will help them survive. I really view it as giving them improv tools.
Yeah.
So there are 5 major tools. The listening, which is the being present in the moment, really listening. Right. Accepting, and the obvious thing is that you accept others and what they bring to the table. But another thing we teach in improv is to accept the situation that you're in. Right. And instead of railing against the situation, it's a good idea to maybe act as though that situation is what's happening. Right. Then supporting each other, the I've got your back thing that we do is improv performers is shockingly not prevalent in corporate life. Yeah. So teaching that's excellent. Then taking competent risks. For years, I had that as taking risks, and that would make people turn pale and tremble. But taking competent risks, as long as you have an idea of what you're doing and some experience, sure, you don't take risks on your first day on the job, but competent risks are good. Sure. And then letting go of mistakes, which is, of course, the most important. Absolutely the most important. And so those are the things we're teaching. And I could use the same 20 improv exercises and use them for leadership, customer service, communication skills, presentation skills, any of it. It's all just depends on how you introduce it and how you reflect on it. And the reflections are the really important part.
Oh, absolutely. So after you teach them some exercises, you have them reflect on what they're learning?
Yeah, pretty much after every game. The other thing I tell them in the sales process is that what we're going to do is we're going to do exercises and reflect on them. Or if you want to talk like a human being, we're going to play games and talk about them.
Yeah, right.
So, and that works. So, almost every game will end and we'll say, so what was that game about?
Yeah.
I mean, for a few games, there's a specific thing that you can ask that will get things going.
Uh-huh.
But I like most of the time, about 3/4 of the time, to just say, so what was that about? Or what happened for you in that game? And then they control the reflection and they make the connections.
And obviously there's huge success in this, as I've listed, and you have on your website, you have worked with hundreds of companies that are finding benefit to this.
Yeah, I think it's about 700 different groups, probably not 700 companies, but it's a really wide-ranging. And just this year, as we're talking, you may be listening to this in the year 2025, but we're talking in 2020.
Correct.
So far in 2020, we've done a bunch of work with Nike and a bunch of work with Amazon, as well as a bunch of other smaller companies. And I just last night, we're speaking on a Sunday morning, and last night I did something I'd never done before. I did a corporate workshop on a Saturday evening. I'd never done that before.
On a Saturday night?
It was for a nonprofit that delivers music lessons to at-risk youth.
Oh, great.
Called the Play It Forward Foundation.
Okay.
And so it was at the director's house.
Okay.
And her husband is a famous musician on a local level. So I got to play on his piano. That was pretty exciting. So it was a combination of talking about their teaching and doing exercises related to their teaching, and they're working with kids one-on-one. And then because they were music educators, I did music improv with them in the second half. Okay. Which, not surprisingly, they were pretty good at the music part.
That's wonderful.
So,
do you do
it was a lot of fun. So it's very interesting to do that work on a Saturday night. I'm not normally wired that way on a weekend night. But.
Right. Do you do a lot of music games in Portland?
We do.
That's great.
And part of the reason is I play keyboards and am musical. And I have a particular skill for accompanying improv music. Yeah. I'm not, by any stretch, a technically gifted piano player. Okay. But when I was in 8th grade, my older brother, Mike, taught me how to voice guitar chords on a piano. Mm-hmm. So like a guitarist could just shout chords at me and I could play them. Okay. Or I could see lists of chords. And what that does is it means all I have to do is put my hands on the keyboard and something's going to happen. Yeah. I don't have to have a plan. Yeah. So I'm quite good at that. There are other people who are better players, and there are a bunch of people across our league who are really, really, really good at this skill. Right. But I'm going to own that I'm one of them. Oh, good. So from the beginning, we did musical games because that's what we were going to do. Yeah. And we've been blessed over the years with some amazing keyboard players. There was a 10-year run where I had one gentleman on Friday night, one gentleman on Saturday night, almost every weekend. Nice. And they were very different, but they were terrific.
Well, it brings a whole different element to a show.
Yeah. There's a thing that audiences are amazed that you're doing improv at one level. Right. But after a while, their brains start thinking, oh, I was thinking along with this. Maybe I could do this. Right. And they're right. With the training, they could. But they see and hear musical improv, and it does not even have to be funny. And they're blown away. Oh, yeah. Completely blown away. Parts of their brain are lit up by musical games that are not lit up in other things that we do. So it just broadens our the experience that we're delivering to them.
Right.
On Friday night here in Portland, I'm going to listen to this later and not remember this game, but we did a rock opera head-to-head, or an all-skate, where both teams played.
Yeah.
We happen to have 2 keyboard players in the house.
Okay.
I was there playing on the red team, and Jake O'Neill was playing on the blue team. And we just figured we didn't have to have anybody sit behind a keyboard when we needed to do a musical game. One of us would go play. And so we did 3 musical things through the night.
Nice.
But we did a team-on-team rock opera. It was about 8 minutes long, about dogs who needed to be adopted. And there were a few funny moments, but at the end, it was like the dogs got adopted, which we all knew they would.
Yeah.
And it was not a surprise. But it was this big awe moment with this tremendous chorus ending, and the audience is like halfway lifted out of their seats.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's just a great way to make the experience even bigger. I mean, Milwaukee had this, the dean of this, Paula Foley-Tillin, for years.
Yeah.
And then when your team moved into the new place on First Street, they had a championship like 2 weeks after you opened, or a week after you opened.
Yeah.
And we show up for championship, and the arena was built without a place for a keyboard player.
I know, we don't have a keyboard player. And I did just interview Paula. I believe that episode's already dropped, and she was fantastic.
Yeah, I need to listen to that.
Oh, she's fantastic. We would love to have a keyboardist. Milwaukee does not play very many musical games. And I'm always blown away by, tournaments or championships when other teams play them, and they're amazing. And I remember playing some throughout my time in ComedySportz. Every once in a while, a musical game will come up, and you're right, the crowd is just blown away that not only are we doing improv, but we're putting music in there too. I mean, they can't believe it.
That's so hard.
Yeah.
And the truth is that if it's taught correctly, it's not that hard either.
Right.
James Bailey from LA is the master of teaching. He can take a bunch of people who are tone deaf, and in 2 hours, he has them believing that they can do a Broadway musical.
Nice.
I accompany him often at the World Championship when he teaches. And he keeps asking me, why do you do this over and over? It's the same thing. I'm like, because when the lights go on in people, it is the most gratifying thing ever.
Absolutely.
It is just, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so I learned a lot from him. I'm a really good teacher at it. He's the master, clearly. Yeah. But we teach musical classes of beginning, intermediate, and advanced in our suite of classes. And it's great. It makes people, even if they don't do a ton of music stuff, it makes them better players too, because it's lighting up different parts of their brain.
Absolutely. And if you have someone who is gentle and will guide you through it, it feels very doable.
Yeah. Well, we've all been told in our lives that we're terrible at singing. Even the people who aren't have been told to keep quiet at one point, and it's like the worst thing you can tell anybody.
Oh, right.
Because music is so connected to your soul.
Absolutely.
It's terrible, and so we often have a lot of training to unwind when we're teaching improv music, but we can do it. It was fun teaching to those folks last night at Play It Forward, because as music educators, they would go, "Oh, I see what you're doing here." Yeah. That's really a simple trick.
Right.
Like, right. It is.
Now, you said something a bit ago. Do you think anyone, music aside, do you think anyone can learn and be good at improv?
I do. And the measure of one person versus another person in improv is something that we really need to just forget about forever.
Yeah.
Because everyone is on their own path.
Sure.
And yes, there are certain players where everyone will see them and agree that what they do is amazing, but other people can't do what they do.
Right.
Because they're not that person. And we're all on a different path. I teach our 101 classes, and I've taught it over 100 times, the sequence of classes. Mm-hmm. And I thought I would retire when I did 101 of the 101, but I didn't.
Right.
And again, I love the lights coming on.
Yeah.
That's what drives me, is people discovering it and realizing, holy moly, this is amazing. And I've also discovered that our 101 class is an amazing way to sell applied improv workshops to corporate clients.
Yeah.
Very valuable. The Amazon stuff and some of the Nike stuff we've done this year all came out of people taking 101.
Really?
Because they experienced it.
Sure. Yeah.
And one of the things I discovered over the years is when we're reflecting on games in 101 is talk about how corporate group might do it differently. Mm-hmm. And that sets it in their brain that we do this corporate work.
Right.
It's very simple. Don't even have to sell.
Yeah.
The people who recognize it will come to you.
Yeah.
And it's really cool.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, the thing about people being different is that we have a guy on our team who 17 years ago took his first workshop. And I was like, does this person speak out loud?
Right.
And he worked his way onto our team after 5 years.
Yeah.
He's a great announcer. He's a great ref. He's a good player. And he's an important part of our organization. And I could not have imagined him. If we made decisions in 101 about who would make it and who wouldn't, boy, we would make a ton of mistakes.
Oh, absolutely.
And we just had there's a person who just did our 301 match.
Yeah.
So we do 101, which is the basics, 201 scene work, and 301 you learn comedy sports games.
Okay.
And it culminates in a match.
Yeah.
And we had this huge class. I had 16 people, so we had this huge. So they get to invite their friends and family. It's a huge audience. Huge audience.
Yeah.
And there was a guy in this class who is on the autism spectrum.
Okay.
Because we came to the first class and a parent told me that, just here's what you can expect from this person. He couldn't play the name game in the first day of 101.
Right.
He could not say his name when it was his turn.
Okay.
So I said his name for him and everybody knew his name. And everybody was like, okay, this is what's going on.
Right.
But 20 classes later, through 101, 201, 301, he brought the house down repeatedly in a 301 match.
Oh, that's great.
It was, my heart was 10 times its size watching that.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I couldn't believe it. And, I was part of it in 101 and a little bit in 201. We have lots of teachers in 201. I host it, but I bring in specialists. And then Brooke Chamberlain is our rec league director, and she runs the 301 class. And she does such an amazing job with that and with him. And, and the other people, a couple of people who were in the class came up to me and said, could you believe this guy?
Yeah.
Could you believe that? They couldn't believe it, and they were in the classes with him.
Right.
It's like, but I told them, you helped with this.
Right.
You created the space where he could do this.
Yeah. Well, I'll never forget a conversation I had with Dick Chudnow years ago. I was teaching some classes down at ComedySportz, early 2000s, I think, teaching 101 or 102. I don't remember which one. But I remember thinking, some of these people just aren't getting it, and they really desperately wanted to perform, with the professionals. Sure. And I'm thinking they're not getting it. And I remember talking to Dick, and he said, you can never say they'll never perform, because someone will suddenly have that light bulb moment and you'll see it and they got it. And he's so right. I mean, it's just someone will surprise you suddenly.
Yeah. In our early days, we would do a 101 class.
Yeah.
And I had 12 people in my group and shrinking every day because, of my 12 founders, week 4, Denise Howard says, I'm moving to California.
Oh, okay.
Or wherever she moved to. I'm like, so this is how this works. You have to always be developing players.
Yeah.
So in the early days of 101, it's like, you're breathing? Check. All right. Come to workshops.
There you go.
Come to team practice.
Yeah.
And we got some great people out of that. And we did have some people who ultimately got frustrated and didn't continue.
Sure.
But they were able to do it at a level.
Yeah.
And a level that, the average citizen doesn't have an opportunity to do. And I wish everybody did.
Right.
But, I've taught over 100 101 classes. Maybe 10 or 12 times have I seen somebody in the first class now and gone, you are going to be in.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And this was like 1 in 10 classes has somebody where I'm sure. I learned fairly early on, about 3 years in, just let it go. You can't decide in 101.
No,
Let it go.
Can't. Yeah, you can't.
And that's the greatest thing ever because, 1993 Patrick Short would have probably suggested to this guy who just had this huge success in 301 that maybe he not continue.
Yeah.
Right? Because it was hard for us.
Right.
Well,
right.
But it was so worth it.
So worth it.
And it's fun how we grow up.
Yeah, right. Well, I can relate as a teacher. I'm an art teacher, high school art teacher. And it's true, I'll get kids in a beginning art class and, who just aren't grasping these beginning concepts. And suddenly you see them, something clicks and suddenly they're just amazing. And yeah, you can't write someone off.
Yeah, humans are so wonderful if you give them the opportunity to be so. Right. And if you create the space for them to be wonderful,
Absolutely. Well, you came to Milwaukee and you did a workshop for ComedySportz Milwaukee performers who were interested in teaching applied improv. And my lovely, talented, handsome with a beard husband, Dave Nelson, took that with you. And absolutely loved it.
He is handsome.
He's very handsome, and he has a beard right now. It's super cute. And because it's we're coming off of winter in Wisconsin, so he needed to warm up his face. But he teaches applied improv workshops now, and every once in a while he'll get a gig, and he'll come back and tell me about it. He loves it, and the people who take the class love it. Improv is so important for everybody to help.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah. And it really is gratifying. I tell people during the sales process, I have never had a dissatisfied client on that side of our house.
Yeah.
Not one. It's like, I want to screw one up to see what it's like. Right? I can't, it's almost unbreakable if you just go in with the right approach. If you're prepared and adaptable. Right. Those two things, and it'll be right. If you're paying attention and you're present in the moment, it will be a great experience for your students.
Absolutely.
And the one thing I did learn though, and I was at a conference last year, and we were doing a breakout on working with differently abled students, teaching improv to differently abled students, and someone in that said somebody was talking about something and being frustrated, and somebody said, "Don't confuse your success with your student's success."
Interesting.
And that blew my mind.
Yeah.
Because it's true. And I've realized I've been living that in applied improv, that I let them control the experience. I give them the space.
Yeah.
I give them the tools. I open the door for them, and I get out of their way.
Yeah. And
it's really profound what can happen. Of course, we're not going to mess up if that's the situation.
Right. Yeah.
So, some groups are a little more difficult than others, law firms. But law firms are really, really interesting because senior partners don't like to be vulnerable.
Yeah, well, sure.
Yeah, and that's the culture of law firms, because I have worked with legal departments in big companies like Intel and Nike, and they're great.
Really?
So It's not lawyers. It's law firm culture.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you've gotten
fun discoveries.
Yeah, I'm glad you've gotten to do this with so many companies and to teach what you're learning to other people in improv. I think it's important.
It's spectacular. If we're going to change the world, this is a way we can do it.
Absolutely. So tell me, where did you get your nickname, Pat Electric Short?
Well, we had to have nicknames because back in the start of things, everybody had nicknames, because Chris Berman from ESPN would give people nicknames as he did the sports news. And so we were talking, and somebody on the early San Jose team said, "Oh, you should be electrical short, get it?" And I was like, I hate it. But but we kept coming up with other things, a day late and a dollar short. And something. I have a name that you can play with.
All right. Yeah,
but I kept coming back to electrical, and then I had to be Patrick rather than Pat because it flowed better. Patrick Electrical Short just has a flow to it. And it just stuck.
Yeah.
So I can't change it now.
No.
But one of my great pleasures is when a new player gets promoted to our team and they are like, well, I need a nickname. And we have some specialists who go to work. It's so awesome. If we're stuck, I will email Mr. Kramer.
Really?
Jeff Kramer is very good at it. But our team often handles the thing ourselves. And we have some ones that delight me and nobody else, which is really great. Like a couple of my favorites. We have Andrew Berkowitz. And I just came up with Busby, as in Busby Berkeley. Okay. Nobody gets it. No one gets it. But Andrew Busby Berkowitz is a fantastic comedy sports name.
It flows very well.
And it flows. It's good. And the one or two people a year who understand it are delighted by it.
That's great.
And those people are important, too. A longtime player for us, Tom McGee, had Fibber McGee, as in Fibber McGee and Molly, the old radio show.
Okay.
Nobody knows about that, right? But Tom Fibber McGee is a great name. And then for slightly more recent, we have a player, Bethany Garner, and she's Bethany the Constant Garner, as in the Constant Gardener, which was a movie a few years ago. And again, it's fading into history and most people don't know, but it's a great name.
Sure. Nicknames are great. I love to hear the origin stories of them.
Yeah, the best one I think I ever did for somebody was I was helping our team form an Amy Gray, still with us, still founding member, brilliant player. And I did one that works on both sides of her name. So she's Zing, so it's Amy Zing Gray.
Nice.
So it uses the whole name.
That's good.
As in Amazing Grace.
Yeah,
yes,
that's good.
I'm very proud of that one.
Well done, sir.
So, thank you. It's the small things.
It is. It really is. So
make big things happen.
What's your favorite game to play on stage?
I'll play anything musical and be delighted by it.
Yeah.
Except the Do Run Run, which is I kind of think is dumb, but. And in fact, when that game came into the league, we didn't play it because I thought it was dumb.
Yeah.
But then about the third time I was in another city and watched audiences falling off their chairs laughing at that game, I was like, I guess we have to play it. I don't get why it's a thing, but it kills. So we play it.
Yeah.
And to do rap as well. So any of the music games, a musical comedy or Sing It or Audience in Hammerstein or rock opera, there's nothing like doing a 3-minute rock opera.
That's awesome.
It's just the music start to finish and strong stage poses and very intense singing about nonsense. It's great. My favorite non-musical game. Well, I could see a replay in any match.
Oh yeah, I love replays.
Every match, right?
Yes.
It's always going to be different. But my favorite game is the obscure game of Memento. And I believe it was invented by somebody in Milwaukee.
So going backwards.
And it comes from the movie Memento. So you play a scene.
Yeah.
Then you play the scene before that. Then you play the scene before that.
Yes.
And then the scene before that, going into the past.
Right.
So it's not like scene in reverse.
Right.
So the scenes can flow. But what you're doing at the end is you're creating offers in reverse that have to be picked up.
Right.
If this happened in this scene, this is going to have to happen later.
Right.
In the playing of it and earlier in the story.
Absolutely.
Right? It's devilishly difficult.
Oh, yes.
Also, I had my worst ComedySportz injury ever during a playing of Memento. I started as a dead body.
Okay.
So I was leaning against, our back wall has this pillar that sticks out of it a little bit. So I'm kind of tucked in the corner. And I was leaning against his dead body. And I thought it'd be clever if, as the scene started, I would slide down the wall to become a dead body on the floor. Well, there was an electrical outlet, which is no longer there, I might add, that had a sharp corner on it. And as I slid down the wall, I carved a hole in my butt.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. So I played Memento with blood dripping down my right leg. And I had to be consciously turned away from And it was a lot of blood.
Oh,
it was not a little blood. It was a lot of blood.
It wasn't pretty.
And and then after the game, our player Bill Cernansky, bless his heart, came into the back room with me and helped me clean up. There's nothing like cleaning blood off of somebody else's butt, but there you go. Bill did it. That's what we do for each other.
We really do. We really do. I would get injured.
Eternally grateful. And then I had to find a different pair of pants because there was a hole carved in those too. And I still have the scar, but I will not show anyone.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
So before we end here, this has been fabulous, Patrick. I'm going to pull out at random 2 games here because you're not here with me to pull them out of this pile. And
that's so unfair.
I know. I wish there was a way.
No, it's cool.
And I
trust you.
No, thank you. I want you to tell me which of these 2 games would you rather play in a show? Okay, so describe the games and tell me which one you'd rather play for whatever your reason is. So let's
that's
see.
Good.
All right, so I've got, let's see, town meeting and newscaster.
Oh, I love them both.
Yeah.
But to preserve harmony in my team, I would pick town meeting, or we call it town hall.
Okay.
And we don't play that game often enough.
We'll talk about it. Explain it to my listeners here.
So town meeting, it's a head-to-head game where both teams will play. And each team contributes somebody to the town council. So there might be a president or a secretary or a treasurer or something. And they're on the field. And the other members of the team scatter themselves through the audience.
Right.
And we get a subject that the town is concerned about. And we have to vote up or down. One of my favorites of all time is we asked for a verb and a noun and got running poodles. So running poodles were a problem in the town.
Yeah.
And the president chairs the meeting, and you recognize speakers on the subject of the running poodles or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And people create characters out in the audience.
Right.
And utilize audience members.
Yeah.
One of my favorite memories is Casey Christie, who's now with Austin, was a Portland player, and he introduced himself as the Reverend so-and-so, and he brought his choir with him. And he had the audience singing him. That's great. And then there are people who stand up and say, I'm here with my 6 children.
Sure.
And the last time that happened, I forget who the player is, but they stood up and said, these are my children. And they were in the middle of a senior citizen group. It was delightful. Oh, no. You just build the situation with the characters. And sometimes the characters have relationships that are either nice or contentious. And there's arguing back and forth. And finally, the audience votes on are we going to allow running poodles or are we going to ban them? And the one team is in the supporting role or positive yay vote, and one team's in the nay vote. So that's who gets points. Right. So not that the points really don't matter much in that game, but it's really cool. Newscaster is a great game where you recreate a local newscast. And we worked so hard on this. We had a player who had been a host on a TV show for a long time, and she brought in 40-year veteran newscaster, Jim Bosley, to talk to us and train us and do it. And we did it. I just have some players who are like, this game is hard and never funny. Well, then what they excuse is it never works. It's never funny. Yeah. That's the excuse to not play it. Oh. And someday we're playing it again. Well, are you hearing me, Portland? Portland. We're going to do newscaster again. But of the 2, I would pick Town Hall. Town Hall. Yeah, that's a good one. I just played Friday night and played newscaster. Exciting. It's so fun. It'd been a long time. It can be great. We did it a lot in the early days in San Jose. Yeah. And I'm just remembering some of those players, Tom Goff and Michelle Devereaux and John Paul Tusky and Tom Barillo were so good at that game. Yeah, it's super fun. And they found bits in there that were just spectacular. Yeah. That was great. So before we go, Christine. Yes. Could I put a button on this with a little story? Oh, all right. Give me a story before we go. So we're in San Jose, California. Before our 3rd show, Michelle Devereaux's little brother, he was 11 at the time, He's probably 50 now, but he was 11. He comes up to Jeff and me and says, guys, here's the thing you should do when people have birthdays in your audience.
Yeah.
He goes, and we go, what? He goes, this is your birthday song. It isn't very long. And we all went, well, that's really funny, Mike. All right, we'll try it. So we did it. And everybody laughed.
They do laugh.
And we did it again, and everybody laughed.
Yeah.
And I called Dick. I said, Dick, we've got this great new thing. It's a birthday song. And you line everybody up on the stage, and you act like it's super important, and you get the person's name, and then you sing, this is your birthday song. It isn't very long. And then you just leave the stage.
Right.
And there's this really long pause, and Dick goes, that isn't funny. And I went, but it is. It works. It kills. Trust me. We thought it wasn't funny either. But it kills. He's like, yeah, whatever.
Whatever.
Click. So we go to the first tournament, now the championship.
Yeah.
1988, Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And we're having a meeting, and somebody goes, okay, also we have this great thing for the birthday song. You all stand on the stage and go, this is your birthday song. It isn't very long. I was like, what?
You.
So Dick told me it wasn't funny, then told somebody in the group, and Milwaukee started doing it and then claimed ownership.
Nice. I remember singing that for years in shows.
We still do. I did it Friday night.
And it's still funny.
And it still kills. 32 years. 32 years I've been doing that bit. And every time, as long as you commit to it and don't act like you've been doing it for 32 years.
Right.
It kills.
It does. They love
awesome.
it.
But that sort of led to the joke that you would show Milwaukee a new game or a new twist on something, and then at the next championship they would announce that they had invented it. So
Milwaukee.
That's not really true. That's not really happened, but that became the joke.
That was the joke, though, right?
Yeah.
Don't share it. Well, Patrick,
awesome.
This has been fabulous. I very much appreciate your time today. It's been wonderful talking about comedy sports with you.
And you. This is a great series.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm hoping people are enjoying it.
We are.
Well, thank you again, Pat. I really appreciate it. I can't wait till we get to see each other again and maybe do a little singing and performing.
That would be excellent. I look forward to it as well.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. The ComedySportz Podcast is produced and engineered by Kyle Hanneken. Our announcer is PJ Rockwell. Feel free to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram. Comments and inquiries can be sent to the ComedySportz Podcast at gmail.com. Created and hosted by me, Christine Rollo Capriolo. Thanks for listening.
The ComedySportz Podcast is an independent production made by CSz players. The views and opinions expressed by the podcast host and any guests are their own and do not represent the views and opinions of any CSz location or CSz Worldwide. Vocabulary used by the host and guests is not necessarily representative of the CSz brand.